Good morning, everybody. It's especially an honor today to speak at Crossroads because for the first time in my life, this is also my church now. And I'm excited about that. My family's excited about that. And we don't get to come that often because I travel more than I anticipated. But I just want to stop for a minute and say how much we love, Bonnie and I, Pastors Jeff and Donna Abels, and how much we love Crossroads Church. And if you do, why don't you join me in giving them a big hand? Come on, let's do better than that. Man. It's also nice to live in a town that has more than one restaurant. Somebody say amen. More than one option. It's nice to be sitting on the front row and have the guy right behind you say, hey, don't forget you're preaching today. That was nice as well. But I tell you, one of my favorite things about living in Lafayette is a new tribe that we've developed over at La Veranda. And so I want to give a shout out to some of my La Veranda peeps today that are probably here hanging out, and especially my girls, Gracie and Carm, and the pistol, she's here. She knows who she is, and that's the end of it. But I love Lafayette. I love being a part of a tribe of people who just love each other, and I love this church. I want to draw your attention today to Matthew chapter 25. We're going to start there, and then we're going to look at Luke 15 and Acts chapter 8. And when I talked to Pastor Jeff, I said, well, Pastor Jeff, are you in a series? What are you doing? And he said, that's an off week. You can really talk about whatever you want to talk about. And I said, okay, that's fair enough. And so as I was thinking and as I was praying and just talking to the Lord about today, what I realized going in, Wednesday night we have a blessing over all of our students, and we're going to have a great time talking about going back to school. But this is a time period in each and every year where consistency begins to come back. And so what I've learned about that over the years is that when consistency comes back and routine begins to come back, that people that have often forgotten about the necessity of having Jesus in their life or church in their life even, it's a great opportunity to stop and just say, hey, as you're developing your routine and you're developing your consistency, why not make Jesus a significant part of that? And so because of that, I just want to share a story with you today. And actually what I want to talk about is the penny. How many of you know a penny? Everybody knows what a penny is, right? I got one here. There's no chance you can see it, all right? But how many of you, let's just have a moment of honesty today. How many of you pick up pennies when you see them on the ground? Just own that right now. Put your hand down. You're all old and weird, just so you know. My wife is a penny picker-upper. And it's really, if you know her, it's out of character for her because she's also a germaphobe. And so if you're a germaphobe and you see something on the ground, her general response is, Den, Jesus told me to tell you to pick that up. But that girl will pick up a penny no matter where she's at. I've seen her dash out into the middle of the street with cars coming at least 4 miles an hour. Maybe not. Man, that might be an exaggeration. I'm not sure. I did see something the other day where there was a penny on the ground, and at the same time she saw it, a little girl saw it. And I just stopped right there and said, Jesus, don't let my wife kill this child over a penny. It's a penny. She picks up pennies all the time. And listen, I just want you to know that for those of you that didn't raise your hand that said you don't pick up pennies, you are normal. Because the rest of us that don't do that, anyway, I'll tell you why. Let me just tell you why I don't pick up pennies, okay? And the reason really is because they just don't have any value. So, well, what do you mean they don't have any value? They're worth a penny, okay? And I know all the sayings, all right? You see a penny, pick it up all day long, you'll have good luck. I know how all that stuff works, but I did a little research on the penny, and here's what I learned. Did you know it cost 1.5 cents to make a penny? Now, for those of you that are going, man, I didn't have my coffee this morning, what that means is this: it costs half again as much to make one as it does the value of it. Plus, if you decide to pick one up, if it's on the ground, somebody's got to put out some effort to do that. You got to bend over And get it, there's a movement even right now in our world to eliminate the penny because people believe it doesn't have value. And still, when we're walking through the park on a good day, Bonnie will pick up 2 or maybe 3. She will pick up pennies. And when I ask her why, this is what she says. Why do you pick up pennies every time you see it? It has nothing to do with the sayings. It has nothing to do with luck. She says, because pennies add up. And here's the best part. All of you that don't pick it up, you'll love this. She says, and I do find the occasional dime. Now, let me just tell you about me a little bit. I'm an accountant by degree, okay? And so when it comes to accounting for things and seeing the value of things, what I've learned about pennies is that they don't add up. And you need to know that as an accountant, I did the math. And so this is what I did, Pastor Bud. You'll love this. We've been together for 31 years now. That's roughly 1,600 weeks. I asked her the other day, I said, how many pennies do you think you pick up in a week? She said, in a good week, 3. She said, but in a bad week, 1. I said, so can I assume for the point I'm trying to make today that you only pick up 1 penny a week? She said, yes. So for 1,600 weeks, we've known each other, and that means she's picked up 1,600 pennies, which adds up to, are you ready for this? $16. I knew Bud was going to clap for that. Now, if she did that for 50 years and literally invested every penny, we'd have about $250 by the time we retired. That don't even pay for a hotel room. Come on, somebody. It's a penny. And even if you get the occasional dime, some of y'all are getting offended. I kind of feel the heat coming this way. I thought it was the lights, but some of y'all are going, bro, it adds up, man. Like I can see it in your eyes, all right? I am faster than I look. You need to know that. What I've learned is this, too, that she's done way more than $250 worth of damage to her back when she bends over to pick them up. And because she's a germaphobe, don't forget it, she picks one up and she hands it to me. My job is to be the keeper of the pennies. And again, I just want to remind you it's a penny. And what we as speakers do, those of us that have the occasion and the privilege to speak publicly and professionally, is we look for illustrations in everything. My son used to tell me, he said, Dad, I hate going to the movies with you because you'll be in the middle of a scene, you're going, that'll preach. That'll preach. That'll preach. That'll preach. And it will. So I started thinking about pennies. And I wondered if there was a lesson for us biblically in picking up pennies. And here's what I'd like to suggest to you today. That even a penny has value. Even a penny has value. From a practical standpoint, that makes no sense. I already proved to you that they don't. They cost more than they're worth. It takes effort to pick them up. And picking them up for a lifetime, now listen, look right here. Picking them up for a lifetime produces very little tangible results. It's why normal people don't pick them up. But there's nothing about our call from God in this world that's meant to be normal. And my wife still picks up every penny she sees. There are many things about Bonnie that I love and that inspire me. She prays a lot. She has an ability to hear God that if you're old enough like I am to remember who E.F. Hutton is from back in the 70s, when E.F. Hutton talks, people listen. When Bonnie talks, Den listens. She listens well. She makes people feel great about themselves. I could keep going on, but the thing I love the most about my wife is this, that she always sees the value of one. I want to read you something from Matthew 25. Let's start in verse 34. He's talking about the end of time. This is Jesus talking. He says, Then the king will say to those on his right, Come, you who are blessed by my Father. Inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the creation of the world. For I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger and you invited me into your home. I was naked and you gave me clothing. I was sick and you cared for me. I was in prison and you visited me. I love the implication of this next verse. that the righteous ones were shocked. They couldn't believe Jesus was saying that about them. And look at how they responded. Verse 37, the righteous ones will reply, Lord, when? Did we ever see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink, or a stranger and show you hospitality, or naked and give you clothing? When did we ever see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will say, verse 40, I tell you the truth, when you did it to, what's that next word? One of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you did it to me. Jesus said, when you did it to one. It seems like that Bonnie's not the only person who sees the value of one, because according to what we just read, Jesus sees the value of one as well. Over in Luke chapter 15, he tells a few stories. I'm just going to read one of those, or part of one of those. Luke chapter 15, verse 1. Tax collectors and other notorious sinners, that's the crowd I would have been in, often came to listen to Jesus teach. This made the Pharisees and the teachers of religious law complain that he was associating with such sinful people, even eating with them. In verse 3, Jesus told them this story. If a man has 100 sheep and goes and one of them gets lost, what will he do? Won't he leave the 99 others in the wilderness and go search for the one that is lost until he finds it? When he has found it, won't he joyfully carry it home on his shoulders? When he arrives, he will call together his friends, his neighbors, saying, rejoice with me because I found my lost sheep. In the same way, verse 7 says, there is more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God than over 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed away. In Luke 15, Jesus tells 3 stories. He talks about the lost sheep. That's the story we just read. Then he follows that with a story about a lost coin. And then the last one's about a lost son. It's one of the most important stories in all of the Bible. We don't have time to unpack that today, but I would encourage you throughout the week, if I can give you homework today, just in the spirit of getting ready for school again, read Luke chapter 15, because the stories will impact your life and mark you deeply if you do. But the first 2 stories that Jesus tells, they start with a moment of desperation. There's a realization that a sheep is lost and a coin is lost, and then there's a process of searching for what is lost. The shepherd who has the lost sheep and the woman who has the lost coin begin searching desperately for them, and the stories end the same way. The third story actually ends the same way as well. And I'm not using it today because the lost son was really based on his choice. But all 3 stories end the same way. They end by rejoicing because what was lost was found. And what I think these 3 stories communicate to us is the same message, that God values those who are lost. God values people who do not know their way. God values people who do not know Jesus more today than He values anything else on planet Earth. It's the most important thing to Him. Jesus said this about His mission when He was asked. He said, the Son of Man came to seek and save those who were lost. And one of the reasons that we chose Crossroads Church, and one of the reasons that I love this body and I love coming here, is because there's nobody on this planet that loves people more that I know personally than Pastor Jeff Abels. He loves people who are looking. Listen, I tell young ministers all the time, I said, look, if you're going to get started, you want to know how to do this thing correctly, you go look at Crossroads Church, you go to the very end if you want to, you can pick any message you want to pick, because at the end of that message, Pastor Jeff is going to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to come back to Jesus or to know Him. Why does He do that? Because He remembers that day when he was lost and looking for something that would change his life, just like I remember that day. And can I just suggest to you today that sometimes the longer we serve Jesus, the less focused we become on the thing that matters the most to Him. And so my job today is this, is to prepare you for the back to school stuff, to prepare you for the routine, to prepare you for some consistency in your life. But to also remind you, I prayed all week this week that some of you would leave here and you would not be able to sleep, you wouldn't be able to rest, you wouldn't be able to function, because you would be so impacted by the fact that people around you don't know who Jesus is. They don't have a relationship with Jesus. And Lord, if we're not impacting that, then what in the world are we doing here? Contrary to popular belief, we're not just here so we can be right with God and then just get to heaven one day and limp our way in. Can I just say something to you today? If God's only goal was to get you to heaven, the minute you gave your heart to Jesus, He'd take you there. You ever thought about that? Why did He leave us here? Because He doesn't just want you in heaven. He wants everybody you know in heaven. People that are lost matter. And the powerful truth that Jesus said, I came to seek and save the lost. That should be the mission of every church on planet Earth. And what I love about Crossroads Church is that it's the mission. It's part of who Crossroads Church is. It's in our DNA. But I want to focus on part of the story that we sometimes overlook. And it's this, that the shepherd, the woman, and the father are only searching for one. They're searching for one. Pastor Bud, I'm not going to lie to you today. Sometimes when I think about the mission that Jesus has left us with, I get overwhelmed. Even as a local pastor, I would get overwhelmed, and now working in our network office and having the privilege of being engaged with all 200 churches that we have in Louisiana and missionaries all over the world, strategic partners in places that are taking the gospel of Jesus to areas that you and I will never go to. It just becomes overwhelming on some days, if I'm just going to be honest with you. I think about Crossroads Church, and I think about how large the gathering is on Sunday mornings and how large the gathering is online. How many people Crossroads Church is impacting on a weekly basis. But when I think about that in the percentage of Lafayette and the surrounding towns, it's still a very small percentage of people. And what I've learned that's consistent all across the state of Louisiana, not just Louisiana but everywhere, is that there's a whole lot more people that don't know Jesus than do. We look and go, oh, well, we live in America where we got a church on every corner, and that's true. But we also live in an area that I would call, in a nation that I would call very much on the brink of being post-Christian, and here's what that means. It means that we're so familiar with Christianity that the truth of it doesn't matter anymore. And can I tell you this? It bothers me. And I hope today that it bothers you. I've prayed for it to bother you. I've prayed and asked. Some of y'all are like, man, I'm telling Pastor Jeff to never let this guy come back ever again. I've prayed for misery. Why? Because if something doesn't happen to where we're stirred out of our complacency to connect people to Jesus, then I'm not sure why we're still here. Sometimes the overwhelming nature of that, when we look at that and we go, I don't even know how many people are in Lafayette, but there's tens of thousands of people for sure in the area. We can get overwhelmed because we're like, man, we got a big building and we got events and people come, but that's still not enough. And what happens when we see the size of that, we can become frozen with inactivity. Our job of reaching people is so big that we often don't know where to start. And so what do we do instead? When we don't know what to do, often we do nothing. I want you to think about this. What it really means to follow Jesus is this, that we put the needs of others ahead of our needs. It's about living generously and using what we have to help others. But there are so many people who need help. There are so many people who don't know who Jesus is. How can we possibly make a difference and know where to start? And what I think this penny teaches us is this, that our job on planet Earth when it comes to connecting people to Jesus is to start with one. I can make a difference for everybody, but I can make a difference for one. When I think about everything that can and should be done to make our world better, I can get overwhelmed as well. There are strategic partners out there that still need our support. There are kids that need to eat and people who need help. And if I'm not careful, I focus so much on how big that task is that I can just sit back and say, well, I'm not going to do anything. It's too big for me. You know that old saying, how do you eat an elephant? Well, we'd make a gumbo. It'd be good, yeah. Somebody said, I ain't putting no elephant in no gumbo. You putting Nutra in gumbo. What's wrong with y'all? But you know how you eat an elephant? You eat an elephant one bite at a time. So here's my question, my thought to you. Here's my challenge to you today. What would happen if we just decided to engage one person at a time? I can't feed every child, but I could feed one. I can't connect to every person that needs help, but I could help one. I can't physically engage people that don't know Jesus, every one of them. As a matter of fact, some of them I'll never even know, but I could engage with the people around me that don't know him. And do you know what? Watch this. I'm gonna let some of you off the hook right now, because you're saying, if I just had a little more biblical knowledge, if I just had some education, if I just had some tools. Listen, you don't need any of that to talk to people about Jesus. You know how to do that? Be nice, number one. Love them, number two. And then when the opportunity comes up, I use what I call the story approach. Here's what it is. You listen to their story first. And then after you've heard their story, you tell them your story. Because your story, nobody can ever take your story away from you. And then when the time is right, if you'll pay attention, guess what the Holy Spirit will do? It'll show you when it's time to tell his story. We could do that for one. You don't have to do it for everybody, but we could do it for one. What would happen if every person in this room today decided, I'll do my part for just one? So let me ask you some questions. Just a couple of things. We're almost done, about to pray. Let me just ask you a few questions. Is there one person in your life that just needs a friend? Is there somebody in the community you live in that could just use a meal? Did you know that most of the time when people don't come to church, you know why they don't come? Look right here. Let me show you this. This is crazy. Because nobody asked. Did you know that 80% of people, 85%, I'm sorry, currently that do not attend church anywhere said, if one of my friends would ask me to go, I would go. Can I just say this? Every church is not like this where they're focused on people who don't know Jesus. But I can promise you this. If you bring your friend to church, let's just call it like that. Let's call we're not even going to tell Pastor Jeff. Maybe he's not watching today. He won't know. We're going to call next Sunday, bring your friend to church Sunday. And you know why? We better call him and prepare him for that. We don't have to call him and prepare him for nothing. Because next Sunday, I can tell you what's going to happen at the end of whatever message he preaches. He's going to say, hey, some of you in here, and they're going to have an opportunity to give their heart to Jesus. And here's what, I'm going to get in trouble now, bud, but I got the mic, and Paul told me he wouldn't mute me. So here it is. So here's what I'm even going to give you permission to do something that's actually cheating a little bit, because next week, Pastor Jeff's going to say, bring your friend to church Sunday, because we just decided that's what it's going to be. Right? I really needed y'all to help me a little more on that part. Next week when he says, everybody bow your head and close your eyes, and then he invites them to raise their hand, I'm going to give you permission to cheat. I'm going to give you permission to peek at whoever you brought. Now listen, some of y'all, when you peek, you're going to go, please don't do that. Okay? So like, man, I don't have any peripheral vision. All right, well, just pray and let the Lord tell you. I don't know. But just peek a little bit. You want to know why? Look right here. Because you'll find that when your friend responds to Jesus, it'll be the best day you ever had in church. You'll say, well, that's not my best day. My best day is when I gave my life to Jesus or when I baptized my kid. All that stuff's good, but I'm just telling you, when you invite your friend to church on Invite Your Friend to Church Sunday on August 8th, 2021, right here at Crossroads Church next Sunday at 9 and 11. When you do that next week and somebody gives their heart to Jesus, you're going to leave out of here. We might be Pentecostal. There might be bobby pins fly. Hey! I just had to get that out. Start with one. Let's chase that thought a little bit. If we just started with one. And then what happens if this is what we do? So we engage with one, we help them connect to Jesus, and then we teach them that that's the way normal Christianity is. And watch, we don't just leave them out there alone, but we say, I'm going to help you help somebody else. And then all of a sudden, your whole circle of friends, they start connecting to Jesus. Y'all are just going, man, you're just doing network marketing. It's the best network marketing scheme on the whole planet. What if we set the expectation that our part in God's plan is just one? What we all want to do, and I remember being a young minister thinking this, I just want to take the gospel to the masses. I want to do big things in the kingdom. What if the big thing we're supposed to do for God is to impact just one? It happened like that in one more scripture, Acts chapter 8, verse 26. I'm going to read the first part of the story. I'm going to tell you the rest of it. It says, as for Philip, an angel of the Lord said to him, go south down the desert road that runs from Jerusalem to Gaza. So he started out, and he met the treasurer of Ethiopia, a guy like me, treasurer, the accountant, a eunuch of great authority under the Candake, the queen of Ethiopia. The eunuch had gone to Jerusalem to worship, and he was now returning, seated in his carriage. He was reading aloud from the book of the prophet Isaiah. So let me just give you the Cliff Notes version of this story. The Ethiopian man, this man, the treasurer of Ethiopia, had traveled over 1,500 miles to worship God in the temple. Now, for us going 1,500 miles, I'll hop on a plane and be at the same meetings tomorrow with Pastor Jeff and the rest of our tribe. So getting 1,500 miles today is not very difficult. We can do that in a plane, but there were no cars, there were no planes. He was in a carriage. So that 1,500-mile journey took him 2 months. He spent 2 months trying to get to the temple so he could worship God. And when he arrived, here's what happened. He couldn't go into the place of worship because he was a foreigner. He was a Gentile. So what he did was he worshiped in the outer court with the rest of the Gentiles. Then he started the 2-month journey back home. You understand the commitment that somebody has to learn about God when you commit 4 months just to get there and home. I can imagine his discouragement. He'd come all this way seeking God only to be turned away. And now he's riding home in his chariot. He's reading from the scrolls of Isaiah the prophet. But he has no idea what he's reading about. And I imagine that he prayed something like this in the chariot. God, I don't understand any of this. All I was trying to do was know you. At this exact moment, Philip, one of the great evangelists of the early church, he was leading a move of God. One of the first great revivals of the day. It's impacting not just the town, but the entire country of Samaria. And the Holy Spirit speaks to Philip, and this is what he says. He says, you're leading one of the greatest moves of God we've seen so far. But I'd like for you to stop and go down this desert road where there's nobody. I'm sure that what Philip did is what you and I would have done. Get thee behind me, Satan. That's not the voice of the Lord. But Philip didn't do that. He went. And when he was on that desert road, the next thing he sees is a chariot coming in dust going up behind it. And it's really an interesting story in Acts chapter 8. Philip takes off running and runs beside him. I just see my brain, I guess it's my youth pastor brain, Pastor Matthew. I don't know if that's what it is or not. But in my brain, I start picturing scenes like he's just reading and all of a sudden the dude's like, what's up? How you doing? I'd have made it about 13 feet. You understand where I'm at? Philip's running beside him. He says, hey, do you understand what you're reading? And the Ethiopian said, how can I without somebody to explain it to him? Philip hops up in the chariot. He shares with him what the scripture means. The Ethiopian eunuch, the treasurer, he gives his life to Jesus right there in the chariot. They're riding down the road. He says, hey, is there anything to stop me from getting baptized? I was here the last time you had a baptism Sunday. I left here so fired up, I was ready to just walk out there and say, where is the devil? I'm going to kick him in the teeth, and I'm going to find everybody else I can, because that's fun stuff. He said, why can't I get baptized right now? Philip gets out, they baptize him. Then the eunuch goes on. Philip goes back, does something else. Well, that doesn't even sound significant. God made him leave, a move of God for one person. Well, here's what Bible history tells us about the eunuch. While Philip was leading many people to Christ, church history records that this man went back to Ethiopia. He began to proclaim the good news of Jesus to the people in his country, and God sent him, there, he sent Philip away from the masses to one guy who was searching after God, and that guy led the very first revival in Ethiopia, took the good news of Jesus to a country that had never heard it before. Why? Because one guy was invested in another guy, because the Holy Spirit told him, you don't know who that person might become. You don't know the reach they could have. Could we, Crossroads Church, we make an impact on just one? Over the last couple of weeks, I've become familiar with the story of a Marine named Kyle Carpenter. Kyle Carpenter was serving in Afghanistan in 2010. He was on a roof on watch with another Marine who was a good friend of his. And they were talking about what they were going to do. It's kind of quiet. He said it was eerily quiet. They were talking about what they were going to do if they were attacked. And if this happens, we're going to do this. If this happens, we're going to do this. And Carpenter's friend looked at him and said, hey, so what happens if they throw a grenade on the roof? And Kyle Carpenter says, I'm jumping off the roof. His friend said, me too. Well, no sooner did they say that than the grenade came on the roof. But Kyle Carpenter didn't jump off the roof. He jumped on the grenade. And when he jumped on the grenade, he sustained critical and traumatic injuries. His friend had injuries as well, but not nearly as severe. Kyle Carpenter was in the hospital for 3 years without ever getting out. He had countless surgeries. I read part of his story where he said this. He said, I remember the first day that I could sit up in the bed and breathe. And I said, well, if I can sit up in the bed, then maybe I can lean my feet off the edge. And he said, then after he leaned his feet off the edge, he said, if I can put my feet off the edge, surely I can stand on my own. And then he said, well, if I can stand, I can walk. And then after he walked, he said, well, surely if I can walk, I can jog. And 3 months after he got out of the hospital, after being in there for 3 years with no break, he ran a full marathon. Now watch, here's the part of the story that matters. When they interviewed him afterwards, you just made the plan to jump off the building. Why would you jump on the grenade? And he said, because my friend's life mattered. A little later on, he was out of the hospital and wrestling with an idea that many soldiers tell me they wrestle with when people say, thank you for your service. They don't really know 100% how to respond. And one day, Kyle Carpenter was walking, and somebody said, thank you for your service. And he said, I said some words, and I didn't even realize that I was going to say them until they came out. He said, so after they came out, I had to go back and reconcile that. But this is... And the guy that was interviewing him said, well, what did you say? He said, I looked right back in that person's eyes and I said, you are worth it. Why would he do that? Why would a soldier look at a complete stranger and say, I would go back again because you are worth it? You know why I think it is? Because he understands the value of one.